"She's not coming with you." That's what I said when my brother pounded on my door, screaming that I was kidnapping his daughter. But Emily was behind me, shaking, pale, and holding a recording in her tiny hand. A recording I hadn't heard yet, but I'd already seen the bruises no one else noticed. Already read the lawyer's threat telling me to back off or lose everything. What Emily whispered next, about working for food, about punishment for missing sales goals, made me feel like I'd failed her before I even started. But I wasn't just her uncle. I was the one man in her life who kept receipts. And now, I had leverage. I said I wouldn't let them take her. I meant it. You'll want to hear how. My name is Mark Delaney, and I'm 45 years old. I live a measured life, keeping my accounts precise and my weekends predictably quiet. The morning sun warms my small kitchen where Emily's sketchbook rests beside my coffee mug, the wall clock marking each peaceful moment. My younger brother James, forever the family wild card, has always tested my patience with his reckless spending and sharp-edged jokes that turn holiday dinners cold. But I've learned to watch, wait, and carefully file away every receipt and message. Evidence has a way of speaking louder than heated words. When my brother and his wife Sarah asked me to watch Emily, for a few weeks I said yes because that's what family does. My niece Emily, 12 years old and uncommonly quiet, has been clinging to my presence in ways I've never seen before. But let me start from the beginning. It was a Tuesday afternoon when everything changed. The late September sun cast long shadows across my apartment's hardwood floors while Emily slowly packed her overnight bag. She'd been staying with me for 3 weeks while her parents handled what they'd called business restructuring. Though knowing my brother's track record with money, I had my doubts about what that really meant. You know that feeling when the air gets heavy before a storm? That's how it felt watching Emily fold her clothes. Her movements were mechanical, like each shirt was made of lead. The room had gone tomb quiet except for the rustle of fabric and her shallow breathing. "Almost ready, kiddo?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. "Your dad should be here soon." That's when it happened. Emily's hand shot out and grabbed my wrist, her fingers trembling against my skin. Her grip was desperate, nothing like the playful hugs she usually gave me. When she looked up, her face had gone pale as printer paper. "Please, Uncle Mark," she whispered, her voice barely there. "Don't let them take me back. I've heard a lot of kids whine about going home after fun visits. It's practically a family tradition. But this wasn't that." Emily's eyes held something that turned my stomach to ice. Real fear lived there, raw and electric, like a cornered animal's. "Hey now," I said, kneeling down to her level. My knees cracked against the floor. "Funny how you notice small things in big moments. What's going on? Talk to me." She just shook her head, those eyes getting wider. Her hand hadn't left my wrist. "Okay, listen." I kept my voice steady, though my heart was starting to hammer. "We're going to slow this whole thing down. Nobody's going anywhere until we figure out what's really happening here. Deal?" A tiny nod. Her grip loosened just slightly. I pulled out my phone, thumbs hovering over the keyboard. "What do you say when your world starts tilting sideways?" I settled for something simple. "Sorry, running late. Emily's got an emergency dentist appointment. Need another hour. We'll text when done." James's reply came fast. "Whatever. Make it quick." I turned back to Emily, who'd sunk onto my couch, her bag forgotten on the floor. "Here's what we're going to do," I said, grabbing a notepad from my desk. "I want you to write down 3 things. Just 3. That are scaring you the most right now. Take your time. Be honest." She stared at the paper like it might bite her. Then, slowly, she picked up the pen. That's when I heard the car door slam outside. My head snapped up. Heavy footsteps on the stairs, too soon, too fast. Emily's pen clattered to the floor as a knock rattled my doorframe. James's signature move, all force and impatience. Something shifted in my chest right then, something fundamental. I'd spent years being the careful brother, the steady uncle who never rocked the boat. But watching Emily shrink into herself, seeing real terror flash across her face, it woke up something else entirely. Something that felt an awful lot like a father's instinct to protect. I moved between Emily and the door, my pulse thundering in my ears. Through the frosted glass, I could see James's shadow, broad and waiting. My hand hovered over the doorknob. Time stretched like taffy as I stood there. Open the door and keep the peace, or trust the fear in Emily's eyes and brace for war. The choice sat heavy in my palm, cold metal against sweating skin, while my brother's shadow loomed larger by the second. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door just wide enough to block James's view inside. My brother's face was already twisted with irritation. "What's this dentist crap about?" he demanded. "Change of plans," I said, keeping my voice level. "Emily's running a fever. Been throwing up for the last hour." The lie felt strange on my tongue. I'd always been the honest brother. But something in Emily's plea had changed the rules. "She needs to sleep it off." James's jaw tightened. "She seemed fine this morning when we talked." "Yeah. Well, kids crash fast. You remember that stomach bug she had last Christmas? Just like that." I leaned against the door frame, casual but firm. "Give her tonight to rest. I'll keep you posted." He studied my face for a long moment, and I wondered if he could smell the deception. But finally, he shrugged. "Whatever. Text me in the morning." He turned to go, then stopped. "And Mark, don't baby her. She's tougher than you think." The words sent a chill down my spine. I waited until his footsteps faded before closing the door and throwing the deadbolt. Emily was still on the couch, hugging her knees. "Is he gone?" "Yeah, kiddo. We're good for tonight." I grabbed my notepad and sat in the armchair across from her. "Now, I need you to help me understand what's really going on. Not just feelings, facts. Can you do that?" She nodded slowly. "Okay, let's start with your days. Walk me through a normal Tuesday." For the next hour, Emily's quiet voice painted a picture that made my blood boil. She described working at her parents' convenience store after school. Not just homework at the counter, but real labor. Stocking shelves taller than she was. Scrubbing floors on her hands and knees. Missing lunch when the rush got heavy. "Dad says I need to earn my keep," she said, picking at a loose thread on her sleeve. "Mom tells me to be useful or be quiet. Remember that accounting degree I mentioned?" It finally came in handy. I started a fresh page, writing everything down with times, locations, direct quotes. My hand was shaking, but the numbers stayed neat. Professional habit, I guess. "Emily," I said carefully, "has anyone at school noticed? Teachers? Friends?" She shook her head. "I'm supposed to say I'm helping because I want to. Family duty." That phrase, family duty, hit me like a slap. How many times had James thrown those words at me when he needed money? I set down my pen and looked Emily straight in the eyes. "Listen to me. Nothing happens without facts. No big moves, no dramatic scenes. We do this smart, we do this right, and you don't make any calls. That's my job now, okay?" The relief in her face was painful to watch. My phone buzzed. James's text glowed on the screen. "Stop babying her. She needs to learn responsibility." I took a screenshot and saved it to a new folder labeled Emily Documentation. Then I started a bullet list of what needed checking. School attendance, grade changes, teacher observations, nurse visits. Around midnight, Emily finally dozed off on my couch. She hadn't even taken her shoes off, like some part of her was still ready to run. The sight made my chest ache. I looked at my growing stack of notes. A lawyer would want more, but it was a start. One thing was clear. I wasn't moving without proof. Hard evidence. Not just gut feelings. My brother had always called me boring for keeping receipts and saving texts. Time to show him boring could be dangerous. The next morning, I pushed open the door to James's convenience store, triggering that tired electronic chime. You know the sound. The kind that makes you think of midnight snack runs and lottery tickets. The place reeked of burnt coffee and desperation, with neon open signs fighting against the grimy windows. James was behind the counter, scrolling through his phone. He barely glanced up. "Well, if it isn't St. Mark, protector of the weak. We need to talk about Emily." I kept my voice low. There was a customer browsing the chips aisle. "About her working here. She feeling better?" His tone dripped sarcasm. Amazing what a night of coddling can do. I waited until the customer left, bell chiming their exit. "Cut the act, James. She's 12. You've got her doing manual labor after school, missing meals." Oh Christ, here we go. He rolled his eyes so hard I thought they might stick. "You always were soft, Mark. Kids learn by working. Dad had us stocking shelves by 10, remember? For an hour on weekends, not missing school." I pulled out my phone, pulled up the state's labor laws. There are rules about this. Truancy laws, basic care standards. James burst out laughing. The sound echoed off the fluorescent lights, harsh and hollow. "Care standards? Listen to yourself. She's my kid, not yours. She lives under my roof. She helps with the family business." End of story. I studied my brother's face, searching for something. Guilt, maybe. Or at least recognition. But all I saw was the same dismissive smirk he'd worn since we were kids. The one that said rules were for other people. "You're exploiting your own daughter," I said quietly. I'm teaching her value, responsibility, something you wouldn't understand. Living alone with your spreadsheets and he gestured vaguely at my whole existence. Whatever this is, that's when it hit me, the legal reality. Without solid proof, Emily stayed right where she was. My word against his, and he had custody. All the righteous anger in the world wouldn't change that. We're done here, James said, turning back to his phone. Tell Emily she's expected home by dinner. No more sleepovers. I stepped outside, letting the door slam behind me. My hands were shaking as I pulled up my phone's camera, carefully framing the employee schedule posted in the window. There was Emily's name, penciled in for after-school shifts that stretched past 9 p.m. I texted Emily quickly. Stay at Mrs. Peterson's for 1 hour. Need to handle something. Then I headed home, mind already racing through next steps. At my kitchen table, I drafted and redrafted an email to Emily's school counselor, keeping it neutral, professional, requesting Emily Delaney's attendance records for the current semester, also noting any academic or behavioral concerns that may have been flagged. The mailbox key felt heavy in my hand when I went down to check it. There, stuffed between flyers and bills, was a thick, cream-colored envelope. Warner and Associates, attorneys at law. My stomach dropped before I even broke the seal. The letter was 3 pages of legal terminology that boiled down to one message: stay away from Emily or face consequences. They'd laid out a neat little trap. Any further interference would be viewed as an attempt to alienate a minor from her legal guardians. They'd already drafted a restraining order, just waiting to be filed. I spread the papers across my table, that familiar rage going cold and sharp in my chest. So this was James's answer. Lawyers and threats. The same brother who'd borrowed money for years without repaying a dime had somehow found cash for legal muscle. I stared at the ultimatum until the words blurred. All those years of keeping the peace, of playing the patient brother, and this was what it came to. A legal gun to my head, using my own clean record against me. One wrong move, and I'd lose any chance of helping Emily at all. I spread everything across my kitchen table like I was prepping for tax season. The threat letter went in the center, Emily's hastily written notes to the left, and my blank calendar to the right. Years of accounting had taught me one thing. When emotions run high, stick to the paper trail. You know that moment when you realize you've been playing checkers while your opponent's been setting up chess pieces. That's where I was. James had lawyers. I had scattered notes and a scared 12-year-old, but I also had something he probably didn't expect: patience and a receipt box dating back to 2015. We need to be smart about this, I told Emily, who sat hunched in my armchair, knees pulled up to her chin. Everything we document stays private. No social media, no angry posts, just facts. She nodded, uncurling slightly. Like evidence? Exactly like evidence. I opened my laptop and started a fresh spreadsheet. Tomorrow morning, we're going to take some careful photos. Your shoes, the ones with holes, those ones. And we'll timestamp your homework from the past month. Get pictures of the pantry at your house next time you're there. But nothing dangerous, okay? No sneaking around. Just what's in plain sight. Emily's shoulders relaxed a fraction. I guess she'd been expecting something more dramatic, like a midnight raid or a confrontation. But that's not how you win these battles. You win them with paper cuts. Death by documentation. I studied the law firm's letter again, noting details I'd missed in my first angry read. The letterhead was local. Warner and Associates, established 1985. The language was standard threatening lawyer speak, but they'd been careful to avoid anything that could look like witness intimidation if this went south. Your dad's paying good money to scare us off, I muttered, more to myself than Emily, which means he's worried. The clock on my wall ticked past 11. Emily had finally dozed off on the couch, still fully dressed. I'd given her my spare blanket, the soft one that always smelled like fabric softener, no matter how many times it went through the wash. Watching her sleep, looking so much younger than 12, I felt that protective anger rise again. But anger wouldn't help her. Strategy would. I scrolled through my phone contacts, stopping at a name I hadn't called in months. Frank Morrison. We'd met at church years back, before I'd stopped going regularly. He had 3 kids of his own and worked as a youth counselor. More importantly, he'd navigated a custody battle that made him familiar with family court. He'd always been the steady voice, the guy who could see 3 moves ahead while everyone else was reacting to the moment. The apartment felt too quiet as I hit call, just the hum of my ancient refrigerator and Emily's soft breathing. 1 ring. 2. I looked at Emily's backpack propped by the door, at the law firm's letter threatening to end any chance I had of helping her. Sometimes pride has to take a back seat to necessity. I'd always handled things on my own, but this wasn't about me anymore. Frank picked up on the fourth ring. Mark? His voice was alert despite the hour. Everything okay? No, I said quietly, moving to the kitchen so I wouldn't wake Emily. I need your help. It's about my niece. There was a pause, then, come by first thing. We'll figure it out. Frank chose Pete's Diner, the kind of place where the coffee's always fresh and the waitresses know your usual before you sit down. I got there just as the sun was warming up the window seats, finding him already settled in a corner booth, looking exactly like he had 3 years ago. Salt and pepper hair, reading glasses hanging from a cord, and that calm focus that made troubled kids trust him. Mark, he nodded, gesturing to the bench across from him. Been a while. Have you ever noticed how some people just radiate stability? Frank had that gift. Maybe it came from raising 3 kids, or maybe from all those hours counseling teens through their worst moments. Either way, watching him pull out a legal pad and uncap his pen settled something in my chest I hadn't realized was jumping. I laid it all out while he listened. Emily's plea, James's threats, the lawyer's letter. Frank didn't interrupt, just made neat notes in margins like he was solving a puzzle. When I finished, he took a slow sip of coffee. First thing, he said, pulling a folder from his worn leather briefcase. We document everything, not just what's happening now, but patterns. School attendance, doctor visits, work, schedules. Every piece builds the picture. The waitress topped off our cups. I couldn't help noticing how Frank had positioned himself so no one could read his notepad. Little details like that reminded me why I'd called him. I've got a spreadsheet started, I said. Good. We'll expand it. He sketched a quick timeline. But here's what you need to understand, Mark. The system moves slow until it moves fast. We gather evidence like we're building a wall, brick by brick, no gaps. We spent the next hour mapping out exactly what we needed. Attendance records, counselor notes, medical history. Frank knew which forms to request and, more importantly, how to phrase things so they'd get attention without triggering immediate alarms. You don't want CPS swooping in without backup, he warned. That just gives them time to cover tracks. By 8:30, we were walking into Emily's school. Frank's presence made a difference. He knew the right questions, the proper procedures. We left with a stack of attendance records and a note from the counselor documenting 3 concerns about student welfare from the past semester. Next, Frank said as we hit the parking lot. Physical evidence. You mentioned her shoes? Back at my apartment, we photographed Emily's worn-out sneakers next to a ruler for scale. The holes in the soles told their own story. I added timestamps to pictures of the bare pantry from my last visit to James's house, plus some overdue notices I'd found in Emily's backpack. Remember, Frank cautioned while we organized the files, every claim needs backup. If you say she's working during school hours, we need proof, schedules, witnesses, time-stamped photos. They'll fight back hard once we move. You know that feeling when you finally find the right tool for a tough job? That's what Frank's help felt like. By afternoon, we had a solid foundation. School records showing spotty attendance, documented welfare concerns, physical evidence of neglect. All organized, all verified. Time to file the initial report, Frank said, pulling up the CPS portal on his laptop. We spent an hour crafting the submission. Just facts, no emotions. Each claim linked to its supporting evidence. When the confirmation email came through, my hands were steady for the first time in days. Report received. Case number assigned. Caseworker will review within 48 hours. Now comes the hard part, Frank said, closing his briefcase. We wait, but we keep documenting. Every day, every detail. I walked him to his car, the afternoon sun warm on my shoulders. For the first time since Emily had grabbed my arm, I felt like we had a real chance. The evidence machine was rolling, and each piece made our case stronger. Thank you, I said, meaning it more than most thank yous I'd given in my life. Frank gave me a slight smile. Just remember, steady wins these races. Call me if anything changes. You know how a storm feels different when you're watching it from inside? That's what the next morning was like. Everything looked normal through my kitchen window. Kids waiting for the school bus. Mrs. Peterson watering her flowers. But something had shifted. I first noticed it when I stepped out to grab the mail. Mrs. Peterson, who'd brought me cookies last Christmas, wouldn't meet my eyes. Instead, she hurried inside, her garden hose still running. Strange, but I brushed it off. Then came the grocery store. I was picking up milk when I caught the whispers 2 aisles over. That's him, Delaney's brother, the unstable one. My hand froze on the carton. Unstable? I'd been called many things, but never that. I kept my face neutral and pretended to read the expiration date while straining to hear more. Keeps that poor girl locked up in there. Something's not right. The familiar weight of my phone felt reassuring in my pocket. I'd learned from Frank. Document everything. Date, time, location, exact words. I made the note while waiting in line, watching the cashier's eyes dart away when I approached. Back home, Emily was doing homework at the kitchen table when my phone buzzed. A friend had forwarded me a link to a local Facebook group. Anonymous posts were popping up, carefully worded but crystal clear. Suggestions about inappropriate attention and concerning behavior. Each one a poisoned arrow aimed at my reputation. "You seeing this?" I texted Frank. His response came quick. "Screenshot everything. Don't engage. They want you to react." So, I did what I do best. I made spreadsheets. Every post, every whisper, every side-eye got logged with timestamps and context. It was like watching my own character assassination in real time, but with better organization. The call from CPS came around too. "Mr. Delaney? This is Sarah Martinez. We're beginning our initial review of your report." I kept my voice steady, professional. "Thank you. I have additional documentation if needed. We'll be in touch." Later, Emily and I were heading to the car for her dentist appointment when I spotted Mike, one of James's old employees, across the street. The look he gave us could have curdled milk. Emily's shoulders went rigid. I felt it before I saw it. "Change of plans," I said, turning us back toward the apartment. "Let's reschedule for next week." Inside, I started dinner early, keeping my movements deliberate and my voice calm. "Okay, so here's what we're doing," I said, laying out ingredients. "Frank's helping us gather everything the caseworker might need. School's sending over your complete file tomorrow, and I've got a meeting with your counselor on Thursday." Emily nodded, some of the tension leaving her face as she watched me chop vegetables. Just then, my phone rang. Unknown number. "You'd better watch yourself," a voice growled when I answered. "We know what you're really doing. Time to expose you for what you are." I saved the voicemail, added it to my log, and took a deep breath. The playbook was becoming clear. Isolate, intimidate, discredit. But they'd picked the wrong target. I'd spent my life working with numbers, and numbers don't lie just because someone's yelling at them. That night, I double-checked. My phone was on full volume and added a new folder labeled Threats. Tomorrow's mail might bring more lawyer letters or official notices, but I was ready. Let them try their whisper campaign. I had something better. Facts, dates, and Frank's steady guidance. Emily's voice drifted from the living room where she was sketching. "Uncle Mark, can you check this drawing?" "Be right there," I called back, feeling the familiar protective surge. They could say what they wanted about me. Some things were worth any cost. The certified letter arrived at 9:47 a.m. I know because I checked my watch 3 times while signing for it. My hand oddly steady despite what the manila envelope might contain. The mail carrier avoided eye contact. Seems everyone in town had heard the whispers by now. Back inside, I set my coffee down and pulled out the official letterhead. Child Protective Services. My throat went dry as I scanned the first paragraph. They were proposing a custody hearing. 2 weeks from Friday. I read it again, slower this time. 14 days. That's all we had to prove everything, to counter every lie. To save Emily. The floor seemed to tilt under my feet as I sank into the kitchen chair. An email from the caseworker, Sarah Martinez, pinged moments later with the exact time and courtroom number. I opened my laptop and started a new spreadsheet. Old habits die hard, even when your world's spinning. Column A, tasks. Column B, deadlines. Column C, status. "You remember what your mom said about the work schedule?" I called to Emily, who was sorting through her backpack in the living room. "She wrote it on the calendar at the store," Emily said. "The one by the register." I added it to the list. Photograph store calendar, document hours. Below that, school attendance records, nurse visits, homework completion dates. Each entry felt like another grain of sand dropping through an hourglass. I couldn't slow down. By afternoon, I'd filled 3 pages with action items, but my energy was crashing. I lay on the couch, staring at the water stain on the ceiling while Emily worked on math problems at the kitchen table. The scratch of her pencil was the only sound in the apartment. "Remember when you were 12? When your biggest worry was getting your multiplication tables right?" I watched her concentrate, erasing carefully when she made a mistake, and felt something crack inside my chest. I pulled out my phone and texted Frank. "Need to talk. Today, if possible." We met at the park bench where he walks his dog every evening. The autumn air was getting crisp, and leaves skittered across the pavement like nature's own countdown timer. "Maybe I should step back," I said, watching a young family push a stroller past us. My reputation's shot. People are looking at Emily differently now, too. What if fighting this only makes things worse for her? Frank was quiet for a moment, scratching behind his retriever's ears. You quit now. You prove them right about everything they've been saying. I know. But nothing, Mark. You're scared. Say it out loud. The words stuck in my throat. I'd spent so many years being the steady one, the reliable uncle, the man with all the paperwork in order. But Frank was right. I'm terrified, I admitted. The truth of it hit harder spoken aloud. If I lose this hearing, she goes back to them. Everything she's afraid of. Everything she trusted me to prevent. It all happens anyway. So we don't lose. Frank pulled out his own notebook. Who's seen what they're doing? Really seen it? Not just heard about it? I started listing names. Mrs. Rodriguez from the convenience store. She's watched Emily stocking shelves during school hours. Tom at the bank. He's processed their overdrafts for years. Sarah from Emily's old soccer team. She noticed Emily missing practices to work. The sky darkened as we added to the list. Each name was a tiny flame of hope, but the darkness of 2 weeks felt heavy around us. I needed something solid, something undeniable. Just one clear break before time ran out. Frank, I said, watching the park lights flicker on. What if it's not enough? You ever notice how time moves differently when you're racing against it? Those next few days blurred into a stream of paper clips, printer ink, and coffee rings on manila folders. Frank and I turned my kitchen table into command central. 3 binders thick as phone books, labeled in his neat block letters, school, health, home. Keep it clean, Frank reminded me, tapping a red pen against one of my drafted summaries. No emotion words, just facts. I nodded, deleting phrases like shameful neglect and deliberately exploited. It killed me to strip away the truth of how it felt. But Frank was right. Let the evidence speak for itself. Remember those old detective shows where they'd have a wall covered in photos and sticky notes? That was us. Except we used Excel sheets and Google Docs. Every receipt, every attendance record, every medical form. All indexed and cross-referenced like I was, preparing for the world's most important audit. Timeline has to be airtight, Frank said, sorting through the school binder. No gaps they can poke holes through. I'd written so many summaries for the caseworker that my eyes were starting to blur. The clock on my microwave showed 11:42 p.m. when I finally got Emily settled into bed. She'd been quiet lately, watching us work with those careful eyes of hers. Just a few more papers to print, I told her, tucking the blanket around her shoulders. Get some sleep, kiddo. Back in the kitchen, I queued up another batch of exhibits for printing. The steady hum of my printer was oddly comforting, like it was another soldier in our paper war. That's when I noticed Emily's backpack by the door, unzipped and listing to one side. Something caught my eye in the front pocket. One of those cheap MP3 players kids use, the kind you can get at any drugstore, half hidden under a crumpled permission slip. Emily? I called softly. No answer. Already asleep. I picked up the player, turning it over in my hands. These things usually had voice recording features. My heart started picking up speed as I navigated through the menus to the recording app. There they were. Files with dates from just weeks ago. My finger hovered over the play button, but I made myself stop. Emily? I called again, barely above a whisper. Still nothing. I took a deep breath and pressed play. Getting too old for excuses. My brother's voice, sharp with that edge I knew too well. You think running a business is free? Welcome to real life, princess. She's saving us a fortune. His wife now. That smug tone that always set my teeth on edge. Why pay some teenager minimum wage when we've got free labor right here? I grabbed my phone and started recording. The playback, hands trembling so bad I nearly dropped it twice. Their voices filled my kitchen, each word another nail in their own coffin. Missed another test? My brother again. Tough. Store needs restocking. You want to eat, you work. Simple math. Besides, his wife added with a laugh that made my stomach turn. It's not like she's college material anyway. The recording went on for nearly 20 minutes. 20 minutes of pure, unfiltered truth. The kind lawyers dream about and guilty people have nightmares over. I created 3 copies immediately, saving them to different folders on my computer. Then I backed everything up to 2 separate drives. No way I was risking a single byte of this evidence. My fingers were still shaking as I typed out an email to Frank. Found something. Multiple recordings dated within last month. Parents discussing free labor and forced work during school hours. Voice recognition confirmed. Timestamps intact. Call me when you can. The cursor blinked at me as I hovered over the export button in my audio software. This was it. The break we'd been praying for. The smoking gun. My breath caught in my chest as I realized what we finally had in our hands. The next morning hit different. You know that feeling when you finally got the missing puzzle piece in your hand? That's what the recording gave us. The center that made all our other evidence lock together. I spread everything across my kitchen table while my coffee went cold. File properties, creation dates, metadata. Every technical detail had to be bulletproof. Ever notice how the most important moments in life happen on ordinary furniture? My cheap IKEA table had become command central for what felt like the most crucial investigation of my life. Frank arrived by 7, carrying fresh coffee and that worn briefcase I'd come to see as our battle flag. "Show me everything," he said, pulling up a chair. And I mean everything. I played him selected clips while he took notes, his pen scratching against paper in that steady rhythm that always calmed my nerves. His eyes narrowed at certain phrases, and he'd tap his pen twice whenever something particularly damning came up. "Here's what we've got to back this up," I said, sliding over a folder. Text messages from my brother about Emily working late. Store ledger entries showing her logging inventory on school days. It all lines up with the timestamps on these recordings. Frank nodded slowly. That careful nod I'd learned meant he was building connections. "I've got 3 people who can corroborate parts of this," he said. "Remember Mrs. Peterson, Emily's English teacher? The one who sent that email about Emily falling asleep in class? Exactly. She documented 6 incidents of extreme fatigue, all corresponding to heavy inventory days at the store." Frank pulled out another notepad. "Then there's Mike Torres. Runs deliveries for the restaurant supply company. He's willing to testify about seeing Emily unloading trucks at 9 p.m. on school nights." My chest tightened. "Who's the third?" "School nurse. She kept records of Emily coming in dizzy from missing lunch. 3 times she noted Emily saying she hadn't earned a break yet." Frank's voice had that controlled anger I recognized from my own throat. We spent the next 4 hours assembling hearing binders. Each one had to tell the story perfectly. School records up front, medical documentation next, then financial records showing the store's declining profits matching increased use of Emily's help. The recordings would be our closer. "Audio exhibits need foundation," Frank reminded me. "We have to prove authenticity before they'll let us play them." I drafted a step-by-step authentication outline. Device ownership, recording circumstances, chain of custody, technical verification. Each point backed by documents, each document cross-referenced and tabbed. By 3 o'clock we had 4 identical binders. Black for the judge, blue for the caseworker, red for opposing counsel, and a master copy in green. The organization soothed something in my accountant's soul. Every piece of paper exactly where it needed to be. "Mrs. Carson next door agreed to watch Emily during the hearing," I told Frank as we did our final checks. "She's known Emily since she was little. Good backup witness too, if we need her." The morning of the hearing, I arrived an hour early. The courthouse halls had that particular quiet you only find in places where lives change direction. My footsteps echoed on the marble as I found our assigned courtroom. I set my briefcase down on the wooden bench outside and watched the big hallway clock tick. Funny how time moves differently when you're waiting for something this important. Each minute felt like an hour, but somehow 2 decades of keeping my mouth shut around my brother's behavior had condensed into this single morning. When they walked in, my brother and his wife, they wore matching expressions of practiced confidence, the kind that comes from always getting your way. They didn't even glance at my briefcase full of evidence. I caught my reflection in the window, calm, steady, prepared. The truth has a way of settling your nerves when you've got it documented in quadruplicate. The bailiff appeared at exactly 9 o'clock, keys jingling as he moved to unlock the courtroom doors. I gripped the handle of my evidence bag, feeling the weight of all those carefully organized binders. You ever notice how the biggest moments arrive with the smallest sounds? Just a key turning in a lock, and everything changes. I've sat through my share of audits, but nothing prepares you for watching your own brother try to destroy your character in front of a judge. Their lawyer was good, I'll give him that. Seasoned type in an expensive suit who knew how to make concern sound like criticism. "Your Honor," he started, all polished gravity. "This is a simple case of an uncle overstepping boundaries, attempting to insert himself between loving parents and their child." I kept my eyes on Judge Martinez, just like Frank had drilled into me. She had that careful, neutral expression I recognized from years of presenting financial records to skeptical review boards. Details matter to people like that. They want facts, not theater. "Mr. Delaney," their lawyer continued, When exactly did you appoint yourself overseer of your brother's parenting? I felt Frank shift slightly beside me. We'd practiced this. I began documenting concerns on September 15th of this year, following direct statements from Emily regarding work requirements interfering with her education. Statements? Or complaints from a child who didn't want to help her family? I have attendance records showing 27 school absences between August and October, I replied, pulling the first tab in my binder. Each absence correlates with inventory dates at the store, verified by their own business records. My brother made a show of whispering urgently to his lawyer. His wife dabbed at her eyes with a tissue that somehow stayed perfectly dry. I'd seen this act at family gatherings, the performance of being wronged. Your Honor, I said, I'd like to introduce audio evidence recorded by Emily herself, documenting conversations about her work schedule. The judge leaned forward slightly. Counsel? Their lawyer stood quickly. We object to any recordings made without consent, Your Honor. Furthermore, we'd question the authenticity of such convenient evidence. I can establish foundation, I said, keeping my voice steady. I have witnesses who can corroborate the dates and circumstances, plus technical verification of the files. Judge Martinez nodded. Proceed with your witnesses first. Mrs. Peterson took the stand, looking exactly like you'd expect a veteran English teacher to look. Sensible shoes, perfect posture, and eyes that missed nothing. She testified about Emily's declining performance, the sleeping in class, the homework gaps that aligned perfectly with late nights at the store. Did you document these incidents? Our lawyer asked. I keep detailed records, she replied, holding up her gradebook. I've noted every instance, including direct quotes from Emily about why she was unable to complete assignments. Mike Torres came next, still in his delivery uniform. He spoke about seeing Emily unloading trucks well past 9 on school nights, about how she'd try to hide behind boxes when he came in. Would you recognize the voices on a recording from the store? Our lawyer asked. Yes, sir. I'm in there 3 times a week minimum. Know everyone's voice. I laid out the MP3 player's chain of custody. When Emily first showed it to me, how I'd verified the dates through metadata, the backup copies we'd secured. I walked through screenshots showing file creation timestamps, device settings, everything that proved these weren't doctored after the fact. The clock on the wall kept perfect time while their lawyer tried to pick holes in our documentation. But we had receipts for everything. Literal receipts, in some cases. Every time he suggested a date was wrong or a record was incomplete, I had another tab to flip to, another exhibit to reference. By 4:30, Judge Martinez had that look I know well, the one that says she's seen enough foundation and wants to get to the heart of things. I'm satisfied as to the authenticity procedures, she said, checking her calendar. We'll hear the audio recordings first thing tomorrow, 9 a.m. sharp. Court is adjourned. As we packed up our binders, I caught my brother's eye for just a moment. That smirk had finally cracked. Maybe he was remembering all those times he'd laughed about my obsession with keeping records. Or maybe he was just counting the hours until morning. Same as me. You see, I'm not really a confrontational person. Never have been. But I've learned that sometimes the quietest weapon you can have is just paying attention and writing things down. I got to the courthouse before sunrise, watching my breath cloud in the October air. Something about empty courthouse steps at dawn makes you feel small and large all at once. Know what I mean? Like you're facing this massive system, but you're also the only one there to face it. Frank met me at the security checkpoint, 2 coffee cups in hand. Ready? He asked. Been ready for weeks, I said, patting my briefcase. Inside, I had 3 copies of the audio file. 1 on the original player, 1 on a thumb drive, and 1 burned to CD. Call me paranoid, but technology has a way of failing at the worst moments. The courtroom felt different in the morning light. Less theatrical somehow. My brother and his wife came in, looking pressed and polished, but their eyes gave them away. They knew what was coming. Judge Martinez arrived exactly at 9, not a second later. We'll begin with the audio evidence authenticated yesterday, she said, nodding to the clerk. I handed over the MP3 player, my fingers steady on the plastic case. The clerk plugged it into the courtroom speakers, and I heard that familiar click of connection. Then their voices filled the room. Emily can handle another shift, my brother's voice crackled through the speakers. Free labor's free labor. School can wait, his wife chimed in. Why pay someone when we've got a kid right here? I watched the judge's face as she listened. Her expression stayed neutral, but her pen moved constantly, noting timestamps and quotes. My brother stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. When the first recording ended, I gestured to Sarah Chen, the school nurse, who'd been waiting outside. She walked to the stand, bringing her medical logbook. Ms. Chen, can you correlate any of what we just heard with your observations? Our lawyer asked. Yes, she said, opening her records. On September 23rd, Emily came to my office dizzy and unable to focus. She hadn't eaten lunch because, in her words, the store was too busy. This matches the timing in the recording where her father mentions making her skip lunch to handle inventory. I pulled out the store's time clock records, the ones my brother didn't know I'd copied months ago. Your Honor, if we replay the segment from 2:15 in the recording, you'll hear references to specific dates that align with these punch-in times. The caseworker testified next, Janet Morris. With 20 years' experience, she laid out what she called a pattern of systematic neglect, pointing to missed meals, academic decline, and social isolation. In my assessment, she said, the child's basic needs were consistently subordinated to business interests. Through it all, my brother wouldn't look at me. Part of me wanted to shake him, to demand he face what he'd done. But mostly, I felt a deep sadness. How do you get so lost that you forget your child is a child? My hand brushed against Emily's sketch in my binder. Just a simple drawing of her dream bedroom, with actual shelves for books and a desk for homework. Sometimes the smallest dreams tell the biggest stories. Their lawyer tried objecting about context, about business pressures, about family obligations. But you can't explain away your own voice bragging about using your kid as free labor. Each objection sounded weaker than the last, like he knew he was just going through the motions. At 11:30, Judge Martinez closed her notebook. I've heard sufficient testimony and evidence, she said. I'll review the complete record and deliver my custody ruling tomorrow at 9 a.m. She paused, looking directly at my brother and his wife. I strongly suggest all parties use this time to consider their positions carefully. The bailiff called, "All rise," and just like that, we were done. No drama, no shouting, just facts laid out in fluorescent light. As we packed up, Frank squeezed my shoulder. Whatever happens tomorrow, he said quietly, you did right by her. I nodded, carefully closing the binder that held months of truth-gathering. One more night to wait. One more sunrise to face. 9 a.m. sharp again. The courtroom clock hadn't missed a beat, even if my heart had. Frank stood beside me as Judge Martinez settled into her chair, manila folder squared perfectly on the bench before her. After reviewing all evidence and testimony, she began, her voice carrying that weight judge's master. This court finds clear and convincing proof of persistent neglect and exploitation. My brother shifted in his seat. His wife's fingers twisted her tissue into confetti. The court hereby orders immediate removal of custody from the biological parents, Judge Martinez continued, each word like a hammer strike. Physical and legal custody is transferred to the maternal uncle, Mark Delaney, effective upon filing of this order. A murmur rolled through the gallery. That soft wave of whispers that follows hard truth finally spoken aloud. I felt Frank's hand steady on my shoulder. Furthermore, the judge added, fixing my brother with a steel gaze, parental contact will be supervised only, scheduled through the court coordinator. Any violation carries a $5,000 penalty per incident. The caseworker, Janet Morris, stepped forward with a blue folder. I'll outline the compliance requirements, she said, her tone professional but firm. Regular counseling sessions, financial support payments, and scheduled progress reviews. Missing any requirement triggers automatic review and possible criminal charges. I watched the color drain from my brother's face as Janet detailed the consequences. How supervised visits would cost them. How missing payments meant contempt charges. How every step would be documented and verified. His wife had stopped shredding tissues and just stared straight ahead, like she was watching her carefully built facade crumble in slow motion. Mr. Delaney, Judge Martinez addressed me directly. Do you understand your new responsibilities as legal guardian? Yes, Your Honor, I answered, my voice steadier than I'd expected. I do. The rest blurred into legal language and signatures. Frank helped me track the important parts. Custody papers, support orders, contact restrictions. We filed everything in duplicate, then triplicate. Walking out those heavy doors into morning sunlight felt like stepping into a different world. News travels fast in small towns, and this news had wings. 2 women outside the coffee shop stopped talking when they saw me. A former supplier of my brother's crossed the street rather than pass close by. By noon, the whispers had grown to conversations. By dinner, they were headlines in our local Facebook groups. Within 3 days, my brother's store, that temple to pride he'd built on his daughter's back, started showing cracks. Suppliers who'd been watching their bills go unpaid while he bought new inventory suddenly wanted cash up front. Customers who'd witnessed Emily working late shifted their business elsewhere. A week later, the closed sign went up. Not temporarily. Not for renovation. Just closed. I wasn't there to see it. I was too busy helping Emily settle into her new routine. Regular meals, actual sleep. Homework at a real desk instead of between stock shelves. Mrs. Henderson from next door had taken Emily shopping while I handled the final court details. They met me on the courthouse steps, Emily clutching a fresh backpack, bright blue with enough pockets for proper school supplies. Through the mesh side pocket, I could see new notebooks, sharp pencils, even a calculator that wasn't scrounged from the store's discount bin. I knelt down to her level right there on those steps, traffic flowing behind us like the world was just carrying on its normal business. "Hey kiddo," I said softly. "Ready to head home?" She nodded, then surprised me with a fierce hug that nearly knocked me backward. Over her shoulder, I watched the regular rhythm of the street. Cars stopping at lights, people walking to lunch, life moving in its steady patterns. Amazing how normal everything looks when your whole world has just shifted into proper alignment. "You know what this means, right?" I asked her as we straightened up. "Regular bedtime, vegetables at dinner, all that boring uncle stuff." She actually smiled, a real one that reached her eyes. "Promise?" "Real. Family protects," I told her, shouldering her backpack while she adjusted her jacket. "It doesn't trade."